Act 1. The price on the pump. The price on this fuel pump looks local. One road, one currency, one company logo, but part of that price is determined thousands of miles away inside a narrow strip of water between Iran and Oman. The Strait of Hormuz carries roughly 1/5 of the world's traded oil and liquefied natural gas. Energy for cars, aircraft, factories, power stations, and fertilizer plants passes through a corridor visible on a single satellite image. In July 2026, visible tanker traffic through the strait fell sharply. On one Sunday, tracking data showed only 6 tankers crossing. Most disappeared from public tracking systems during the passage. Oil prices moved almost immediately. The world has dozens of major energy producers, hundreds of tankers, and thousands of suppliers. But much of that global system still depends on one exit. Act 2. Many brands, one bottleneck. At the consumer end, the energy market appears diversified. Shell, Exxon, BP, Chevron, independent suppliers. At the production end, the names also appear separate. Saudi Aramco, ADNOC in the United Arab Emirates, Qatar Energy, Kuwait Petroleum, Iraq, Iran. Different governments own them. Different companies operate them. Different tankers carry their products. But many of those tankers begin their journey inside the same enclosed body of water. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates possess pipeline alternatives. Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, and most of Iraq remain heavily dependent on Hormuz. Qatar faces an additional problem. Its liquefied natural gas requires specialized terminals, cryogenic storage, and dedicated ships. It cannot simply be placed inside an oil pipeline and redirected across the desert. The market is competitive above the surface. The infrastructure underneath it is concentrated. The brands are different. The exit remains the same. Act 3. How the dependence was built. This vulnerability was not created by one decision. It grew through decades of infrastructure investment. Oil fields expanded around the Persian Gulf. Refineries, storage tanks, and export terminals were built near those fields. Deep-water ports were designed for larger tankers. Asian and European refineries were configured to process Gulf crude. Long-term contracts connected producers inside the Gulf with customers thousands of miles away. Every new facility made the system more efficient. It also made the existing exit more valuable. The weakness became impossible to ignore during the Iran-Iraq War. Commercial vessels were attacked during the conflict known as the Tanker War. Saudi Arabia responded by developing the East-West Pipeline. It runs approximately 1,200 kilometers from the eastern oil-producing region to Yanbu on the Red Sea. Act 4. The strait does not need to close. A disruption at Hormuz does not require every ship to be stopped. It does not require a permanent physical blockade. The process begins with risk. A vessel is attacked, a warning is transmitted, a mine is reported, an insurer changes the terms of coverage, a ship owner delays departure, a crew refuses the assignment, an empty tanker remains outside the Gulf instead of entering to collect its cargo. The waterway can remain technically open while commercial movement collapses. Large tankers require insurance for the vessel, the cargo, and the additional risk of entering a conflict zone. War risk policies can be reviewed every 24 to 48 hours. In July 2026, insurance rates for vessels inside the Gulf moved from approximately 2% toward 3% of a ship's value. Some industry estimates warned that coverage could reach 5%. For a valuable tanker, that can add hundreds of thousands of dollars to a single voyage, and that decision is made before the ship reaches the strait. A vessel without acceptable coverage may not sail. A charterer facing an extreme premium may delay the cargo. A crew may reject the route. A buyer may begin searching for another supplier. During the latest disruption, some vessels switched off their automatic identification system signals while crossing. Others transferred oil from ship to ship outside Hormuz, near Oman. These methods keep limited volumes moving, but they make the system slower, more expensive, and more difficult to monitor. Iran does not need to stop every tanker. It only needs to make passage expensive enough that owners, insurers, and crews begin stopping themselves. Act 5. Why the pipelines could not replace it. The bypass system has 3 structural limits: capacity, terminals, exposure. Saudi Arabia's East-West pipeline can move up to 7 million barrels per day, but approximately 2 million barrels are required by refineries on the western coast. That leaves roughly 5 million barrels per day available for export. The pipeline from the United Arab Emirates to Fujairah adds approximately 1.8 million barrels per day. Before the 2026 conflict, Around 20 million barrels of oil and petroleum products move through Hormuz every day. The arithmetic is simple. The two major operational bypasses can preserve part of the flow. They cannot reproduce all of it. And a pipeline is only the first half of the system. The receiving port must store the oil, blend it, schedule it, and load it onto another tanker. Storage tanks, loading arms, and available berths create another physical limit. The third problem is exposure. The Saudi route ends on the Red Sea, where vessels must pass close to another vulnerable maritime choke point, Bab el-Mandeb. The east-west pipeline itself has previously been attacked.
Saudi's ministry did not specify who launched the attacks, but the country has intercepted many Iranian missiles and drones in recent weeks.
The UAE route ends at Fujairah, where loading operations and nearby infrastructure can also be disrupted. A bypass does not eliminate risk, it relocates it. Governments are now planning additional pipelines, terminals, and land corridors. Act 6. When shipping stops, production stops. The first consequence appears at sea. The deeper consequence begins inside the producing countries. Oil fields cannot continue producing indefinitely when export terminals stop moving cargo. Storage tanks begin to fill. Once available storage is exhausted, production must be reduced. A maritime bottleneck becomes a production bottleneck. The second effect appears in the queue. By June 2026, more than 1,000 cargo vessels were estimated to be waiting for normal Gulf operations to resume. Their combined value, including cargo, was estimated at more than $100 billion. Thousands of seafarers were connected to the backlog. Every stationary vessel continues generating costs. Charter payments continue. Crews remain aboard. Ports lose scheduled arrivals. Refineries wait for crude. Factories wait for materials. The third effect reaches products that do not look like oil. Diesel moves trucks and agricultural machinery. Jet fuel moves aircraft. Petroleum feedstocks enter plastics, synthetic materials, and chemicals. Natural gas supports fertilizer and industrial production. The Strait does not determine the entire price of these products, but it adds a concentrated risk premium to every system that depends on predictable energy delivery. Act 7. Open on paper, restricted in practice. By mid-July 2026, the status of Hormuz had become contradictory. Iran said the strait was closed. The United States said commercial traffic was flowing. But the market produced a clearer answer. Operators remained cautious. Visible tanker traffic fell to its lowest level in several weeks. Most of the 6 tankers seen crossing on one Sunday disabled public tracking during the transit. No visible LNG carrier entered over the same weekend. Commercial movement was reported far below the previous week. Several tankers conducted ship-to-ship transfers outside the strait near Oman. The waterway could therefore be described as open, while its normal commercial system remained severely restricted. A naval escort can move a group of vessels. It cannot immediately restore insurer confidence. A government statement can declare the route open. It cannot compel an owner to risk a ship, a cargo, and a crew. A pipeline can preserve several million barrels of exports. It cannot instantly reproduce the wider network built around Hormuz. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are now considering additional pipeline capacity and East Coast infrastructure. Other Gulf producers are studying alternative routes. These projects may eventually reduce the strait's leverage, but the world diversified its suppliers long before it diversified their exit. Act 8. The architecture of power. The lesson of Hormuz is not that one country owns the global energy market. It is that decades of expansion left one critical function concentrated. The oil fields belong to different governments. The terminals belong to different companies. The ships carry different flags. The fuel is sold under different brands. But the system still converges at one narrow exit. That exit does not need to stop every tanker to exercise power. It only needs to change the calculation made by insurers, owners, crews, and buyers. The global economy often appears most diversified where consumers can see it. Its real concentration sits deeper inside the infrastructure. A bridge, a port, a pipeline, a shipping lane. One physical connection can sit underneath thousands of commercial choices. The Strait of Hormuz is one of those connections, and after 40 years of attempts to build around it, the world is still paying for its dependence. If you value documentaries that uncover the hidden systems behind familiar industries, subscribe to Architects of Power. No motivation, no hero worship. only power and its consequences.